He fell in love with the alien he was ordered to kill, and now they're both being hunted. The airlock cycled with a hiss that Jacob felt in his teeth. He stepped through into the horizon's edge, gravity plates engaging beneath his boots with a subtle pull that told him the ship was running at Earth standard, 0.98 G, close enough to feel like home, but just off enough to remind him he was somewhere else. The corridor smelled of recycled air and lubricant, sterile and functional. Commander Vance's final words still echoed in his skull. Assess. Confirm. Eliminate if necessary. Do not compromise the mission. Jacob adjusted the strap of his duffel and moved toward the security checkpoint, where Captain Hale waited with a data pad and an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Lieutenant Reiner, she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, professional. Welcome aboard. Your quarters are on Deck 3. I'll have someone show you after the briefing. Appreciated, Captain. The Athari delegation arrives in 2 hours, Hale continued, her gray-green eyes flicking toward the main docking bay. You'll be working directly with their liaison on joint security protocols. I expect cooperation, not suspicion. We're here to build bridges, not burn them. Jacob nodded, though the irony wasn't lost on him. He was here to do exactly the opposite if the Athari liaison proved to be the threat Vance believed she was. The file on Seraphine Orai had been sparse. Xenobiologist, diplomat, unconventional temperament. But the intelligence assessment had been clear. Potential security risk. Extreme cultural deviation. Loyalties uncertain. 2 hours later, Jacob stood in the observation gallery overlooking the primary docking bay, watching through reinforced glass as the Athari shuttle descended with mechanical grace. The craft was organic in design, its hull curved and smooth like polished bone, and when the boarding ramp extended, Jacob's breath caught. She emerged first. Seraphine Orai was impossible to miss. Her skin was a vivid electric blue, not the muted lavender or gray he'd seen in the briefing images of other Athari, but something bold and alive, as though the ocean itself had taken human shape. Her hair cascaded over her shoulders in wild waves of magenta pink, untamed and startling against the disciplined procession of gray-skinned delegates behind her. She moved with predatory grace, each step deliberate, her amber gold eyes sweeping the bay like a hunter assessing terrain. Jacob forced himself to breathe. This was the target, the potential threat, the woman he might have to kill. She looked directly at him through the glass, and for a heartbeat, their eyes locked. Her gaze was fierce, intelligent, and utterly unafraid. Then she turned away, following the delegation toward the welcome committee, and Jacob realized his hands were clenched at his sides. Captain Hale's voice crackled through his earpiece. Lieutenant, report to conference room 7. You'll be meeting with Liaison Orai in 15 minutes. Jacob descended to the conference level, his training snapping into place like armor. He reviewed what he knew. Athari valued emotional restraint, avoided physical contact outside bonded pairs, communicated through bioluminescent patterns he couldn't yet read. Seraphine was an outlier. Her coloration marked her as genetically divergent, her temperament reportedly volatile by her people's standards. That made her unpredictable. Dangerous. When he entered the conference room, she was already there, standing with her back to him, studying the star map projected across the far wall. She didn't turn when the door sealed behind him. Lieutenant Reiner, she said, her voice low and precise, each syllable carefully shaped. I've read your service record. Impressive, also heavily redacted. Classified operations, Jacob replied evenly. Standard protocol. Of course. She turned then, and up close she was even more striking. Her face angular and sharp, her eyes burning with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. Patterns of soft light flickered along her forearms, pale blue against deeper blue, moving in sequences Jacob couldn't interpret. I assume you've been briefed on Athari communication protocols? Basic overview, I'm still learning. Then I'll speak plainly. She stepped closer, and Jacob held his ground. My people believe your species is impulsive and dangerous. Your people believe mine are cold and calculating. Neither assessment is entirely wrong. We're here to prove we can work together anyway. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as though she'd expected resistance. Captain Hale has assigned us to design joint security protocols for the diplomatic quarters. We'll need access to your defensive system's personnel rosters, emergency procedures. I assume that's acceptable? Within limits. Naturally, a flicker of something amusement maybe crossed her face. Shall we begin? They worked side by side for the next 3 hours, reviewing schematics and threat assessments. Seraphine was methodical, her questions sharp and probing. Jacob found himself grudgingly impressed by her tactical thinking. She caught inefficiencies in the ship's layout that he'd missed, pointed out blind spots in surveillance coverage, suggested improvements that were both practical and elegant. She was also distractingly present. The way she leaned over the table to mark a schematic, the way her hair fell forward and she absently tucked it behind one slightly elongated ear, the way her luminescent patterns shifted when she was concentrating, pale blue deepening to something richer, almost violet. "You're staring," she said without looking up. Jacob's jaw tightened. "Your bioluminescence. I'm trying to understand it." Curiosity or surveillance? Both. She glanced at him then, and something in her expression softened fractionally. "At least you're honest." She held up her forearm, where the patterns were pulsing in slow waves. "This means I'm focused, engaged. If the patterns accelerate, I'm stressed. If they fade entirely, I'm shutting down emotionally. It's involuntary. We can't lie with our skin." "That must be inconvenient." Constantly. She returned to the schematic, but her tone had shifted, less guarded, more curious. "What about you? How do humans hide what they feel?" "Practice. Is that why your hands haven't stopped moving since we started? You keep adjusting your sleeve, tapping your fingers, checking your terminal, nervous energy poorly contained." Jacob froze. She was right. He forced his hand still. "Observant. It's my job." Before Jacob could respond, the ship's emergency alarm shrieked to life. The lighting shifted to red, and Captain Hale's voice cut through the chaos. "Hull breach, Cargo Bay 4, all personnel, emergency protocols. This is not a drill." Jacob was moving before he finished processing the words, Seraphine beside him. They sprinted through corridors that shuddered with decompression warnings, crew members scrambling toward emergency stations. The cargo bay door was sealed, warning lights flashing, but the structural integrity monitor showed catastrophic damage. Something had punched through the outer hull. "Override," Jacob barked, pulling up the access panel. His fingers flew across the interface while Seraphine braced against the wall, her patterns flaring white-hot. "There are people inside," she said, her voice tight. "2 Athari engineers. I can hear them through the intercom." The door cracked open and the escaping air hit them like a fist. Jacob grabbed Seraphine's arm and hauled her through the gap, the door slamming shut behind them with mechanical finality. Inside, the bay was chaos. Cargo containers tumbling in slow motion toward the ragged tier in the hull, atmosphere screaming into vacuum, 2 figures clinging desperately to a support beam. Jacob's training took over. He spotted the emergency seal kit mounted near the airlock, launched himself toward it while Seraphine moved for the engineers. The world became motion and calculation, distance, trajectory, oxygen reserves ticking down in his HUD. He reached the kit, activated the foam sealant, aimed for the breach. Then Seraphine screamed. A cargo container, massive and spinning, careened toward her. She couldn't reach cover in time. Jacob didn't think. He threw himself between her and the impact, arms wrapping around her as they crashed together into the bulkhead. The container slammed into his shoulder with bone-crushing force, and pain exploded through him, but his body had already curled protectively around hers, shielding her smaller frame. The foam sealant erupted across the breach, hardening instantly, and the shrieking wind died. Gravity reasserted itself, and they dropped hard to the deck, Jacob's vision swimming. "Don't move," Seraphine said, her voice sharp. Her hands pressed against his chest, and he realized she was checking for injuries, her fingers moving with clinical precision, even as her luminescent patterns blazed a frantic, chaotic gold he'd never seen before. "I'm fine," Jacob managed, though his shoulder screamed otherwise. "You're not." She leaned closer, and for a moment her face filled his vision, those amber eyes wide, her breath quick against his skin. "Why did you do that?" Jacob didn't have an answer that wouldn't betray everything. He'd acted on instinct, and instinct was supposed to be trained out of him. He was supposed to assess threats, not take bullets for them. Reflex, he said finally. Her patterns flickered, shifted to something he couldn't name. Then she gripped his forearm with both hands, her skin warm against his, and held on as though anchoring herself. Among my people, she said quietly, this is a life debt. You saved me. That means something. Jacob stared at her hand on his arm, feeling the heat of her touch, the steady pulse of light beneath her skin. He'd been sent here to kill this woman. Instead, he'd thrown himself in front of death to protect her. Commander Vance's voice would be waiting in his encrypted messages. The mission parameters hadn't changed. But everything else had. Medical cleared Jacob with a fractured clavicle and orders to rest. He ignored both. Commander Vance's encrypted message waited in his quarters. Report overdue. Confirm threat level within 48 hours or abort mission. Abort meant someone else would finish what he'd started. Someone who wouldn't throw themselves in front of cargo containers. He deleted the message without responding. Captain Hale assigned them to investigate together. The cargo bay explosion had been deliberate, a shaped charge timed to kill Athari personnel. Jacob and Seraphine requisitioned a workspace in the auxiliary security office, a cramped room humming with monitors. Here, Seraphine said, leaning over his shoulder. Her hair brushed his neck, warmth radiating from her body. The crate was logged 6 days ago. Junior engineer Mark Tennyson signed for it. We should talk to him. She straightened but didn't step back. It was the first time she'd used his given name. Her eyes searched his, patterns flickering uncertain gold. Why did you shield me? She asked. Your tactical training should have prioritized your own survival. Should have, Jacob agreed, but didn't. She held his gaze, patterns shifting warmer. My people would say that makes you foolish, emotionally compromised. What do you say? I say I don't understand you, and that terrifies me more than it should. His terminal chimed. Forensics had found chemical residue, something organic, not standard human explosives. Seraphine pulled up the analysis, her expression hardening. This is Athari, she said quietly. A bioaccelerant we use in controlled demolition. Restricted technology. Someone stole it from our delegation ship. Or wants us to think they did. Her eyes narrowed. You think this is a frame? I think someone wants our governments pointing weapons at each other. Her patterns flared bright, surprise mixed with approval. You're more perceptive than I expected. I could say the same about you. The corner of her mouth lifted, then were both full of surprises. They spent 3 days buried in data. Jacob learned to read her bioluminescence, anxiety spiking erratically, focus bringing steady waves, frustration turning deep violet. She learned his tells, how he rubbed his neck when puzzled, how his jaw tightened on leads, how his eyes tracked her movements. They worked late into the ship's night cycle. The office became their territory, littered with empty coffee bulbs and meal trays. Seraphine paced when thinking, restless and powerful, and Jacob found himself watching how her muscles shifted beneath blue skin, how her hair caught the monitor light. Tell me about music, she said one night, settling into the chair beside him, close enough that he could smell something faintly floral on her skin. My people don't have music. I don't understand the purpose. It's not about purpose, Jacob said, pulling up his archive. It's about feeling. He played her a violin solo, slow and melancholy. Seraphine listened with her eyes closed, and Jacob watched her patterns shift with the melody. Soft gold bleeding into pale blue, rippling like water. When it ended, she opened her eyes, luminous. Show me how you communicate, really communicate. She extended her arm, palm up, patterns moved slowly, deliberate. This is how we speak when words aren't enough. Jacob's fingertips hovered. May I? Her patterns flared warmer. Yes. He touched her forearm gently, tracing light beneath her skin. Her flesh was hot, pulse quickening under his fingers. The patterns bloomed into rich amber gold spreading to her shoulder. What does this mean? He asked, voice rough. Curiosity, she said unsteadily. Interest, connection. Just connection? Her eyes met his, patterns blazing. The word hung between them, dangerous and undeniable. Jacob's thumb moved in slow circles, watching light dance in response. a conversation neither could control. "This is a terrible idea," he said. "I know. I'm human, you're Athari, our governments barely trust each other. And there are things about me you don't know, things that would make you hate me." "I doubt that." She shifted closer, hand rising to rest against his chest over his heart. He felt the heat through his shirt. "But I'm willing to be proven wrong." Jacob's terminal chimed. Another encrypted message from Vance. "Final warning, complete assessment or extraction team deploys in 48 hours, non-negotiable." "What is it?" Seraphine asked, patterns dimming to concerned blue. "Nothing," Jacob lied, hating himself for it. "Just a routine check-in." She didn't press. "We should keep working. Someone accessed the maintenance ducts before the explosion." They descended into the maintenance level, navigating a crawlspace barely wide enough for two. Jacob went first, injured shoulder protesting. Seraphine pressed against his back. The air was thick, warm, intimate. "Here," Jacob said, finding the hidden data node. He worked through connections while Seraphine's breath warmed his neck, her hand steadying herself on his hip. Her patterns cast faint gold shadows on metal walls. The download completed. They emerged breathing hard, and when she brushed dust from his shoulder, her hand lingered. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing me when the evidence pointed at my people." "I don't think you're the enemy," Jacob said, clarity sinking through him. "I don't think you ever were." Her patterns blazed bright. She stepped closer, hand sliding to his jaw, thumb tracing his cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Jacob, whatever happens, I want you to know you've changed something in me, something I didn't think could change." He covered her hand with his, turning his face into her palm. "Seraphine." His terminal chirped. Captain Hale's voice, urgent. "Lieutenant, Liaison Ori, report to the bridge immediately. We've found Junior Engineer Tennyson. He's dead." They ran. The engineer's quarters were sealed. Dr. Okonkwo was inside, expression grim. The body lay on the bunk, skin mottled with Athari biotoxins, the same compound from the explosion. "Dead at least 12 hours, Okonkwo said. Toxin delivered by injection. Professional work." Captain Hale turned to them, face carved from stone. "This just became murder. And right now, evidence suggests an Athari operative is eliminating witnesses." Jacob felt Seraphine go rigid. Her patterns had gone dark, the shutdown response. He reached for her hand before he could stop himself, lacing their fingers together in full view of everyone. "With respect, Captain," Jacob said, "someone is framing the Athari delegation, someone who wants both our governments convinced the other side is hostile." Hale's eyes moved to their joined hands, then back to his face. "You'd better be right, Lieutenant, because if you're wrong, we're looking at an act of war." That night, Jacob stared at Vance's final message and the decision he could no longer avoid. The extraction team would arrive in 2 days. They would kill Seraphine, fabricate evidence, and light the fuse on a conflict that would consume thousands. Unless he stopped them. Unless he chose treason. Jacob found Seraphine in her quarters at 300 hours. She answered the door in loose sleeping clothes, hair disheveled, eyes alert despite the hour. Her patterns flickered, confused blue-violet when she saw his face. "What's wrong?" "I need to tell you something." His voice was steady, but his hands shook. "And after I do, you'll probably want me dead." She stepped aside, letting him in. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Her quarters were sparse, functional furniture, a few holographic images of what he assumed were family members, the faint scent of something earthy and floral. She crossed her arms, patterns pulsing warily. "Then tell me." Jacob met her eyes, forcing himself not to look away. "I wasn't sent here as a security consultant. I'm Special Operations, Territorial Defense Command. My orders were to assess you as a potential threat to Earth's interests and, if necessary, eliminate you." The silence stretched. Her patterns flared white-hot, then drained to nearly black. When she spoke, her voice was lethal quiet. "You were sent to kill me." "Yes, and you're telling me this now because I can't do it." Jacob's throat tightened. "Because Vance is sending an extraction team in 48 hours to finish what I was supposed to complete. Because you need to know what's coming." Her laugh was bitter, sharp. How considerate. The assassin develops a conscience. She turned away, patterns churning through colors he'd never seen, rage bleeding into hurt, bleeding into something darker. I knew humans were dangerous. I told myself you might be different. I risked everything for someone who was planning my execution. Seraphine, did any of it mean anything? She whirled back, eyes blazing. The investigation, the conversations, when you touched me, when you looked at me like I was… Her voice cracked. Was any of it real? All of it, Jacob said, the words rough. Everything after the cargo bay was real. Before that, I was following orders. After, I couldn't. Because you're not what they told me you'd be. Because you're… What? Interesting, useful, good in bed, potentially? Because you're someone worth committing treason for. That stopped her. Her patterns stuttered, confused gold mixing with the anger. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Before she could respond, her terminal chimed. She glanced at it, and whatever she saw made her patterns go dark again. Kelthos has summoned me to the delegation ship. Immediately. She looked at Jacob, something breaking in her expression. He knows. Someone told him. Then don't go. If I don't, they'll declare me Cathara, socially dead, severed from my people permanently. Her voice was hollow. Everything they've said about me, that my coloration marks me as unstable, that I'm too volatile for diplomatic work, this will prove them right. Or it will prove you're brave enough to choose your own path. Easy for you to say. You're not the one being erased. Jacob's terminal buzzed. Captain Hale's message was terse. Lieutenant Reiner, report to my ready room. Now. They stared at each other across the small space, the weight of impossible choices crushing down. Go, Seraphine said finally. Face your consequences. I'll face mine. Jacob left, but the look in her eyes haunted him down every corridor. Captain Hale was waiting, her expression granite. Behind her desk, a holoscreen displayed intercepted communications. Jacob's service record, Vance's mission briefing, everything laid bare. Sit down, Lieutenant. Jacob remained standing. Captain… That wasn't a request. Her voice could cut steel. You lied to me, to my crew. You came aboard my ship with orders to assassinate a diplomatic envoy, and you said nothing. I know. Do you? Hale leaned forward. Do you have any idea what you've done? The diplomatic crisis this could cause? The ammunition you've given every hardliner who thinks first contact was a mistake? I understand the consequences. I don't think you do. But her voice softened fractionally. However, I've also been monitoring your communications with Commander Vance. I've seen you dodge his orders, falsify reports, and actively work against your mission parameters. She paused. Why? Because my orders were wrong, because Seraphine isn't the enemy, because someone is trying to start a war, and killing her would have given them exactly what they wanted. Hale studied him for a long moment. I'm obligated to report this to Territorial Defense Command, but I'm also obligated to investigate credible threats to this mission. And right now, the bigger threat isn't a rogue lieutenant. It's whoever is manipulating both our governments into conflict. She glanced at her chronometer. I'm giving you 12 hours to disappear. After that, I report everything, and whatever protection I can offer ends. Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me. Just prove I'm not making the biggest mistake of my career. Jacob ran. The Athari delegation ship was locked down, but Jacob's special ops training hadn't been wasted. He bypassed security, navigated corridors that bent and curved in ways human architecture never would, following the faint pull of Seraphine's biosignature he'd memorized without realizing it. He found her in a meditation chamber, circular, walls lined with bioluminescent panels that pulsed with communal rhythm. She knelt in the center, Kelthos standing over her, silver eyes cold. Jacob Reiner, Kelthos said without turning, the human who corrupted our liaison. I didn't corrupt anyone. Seraphine makes her own choices. Does she? Kelthos's patterns were rigidly controlled, almost mechanical. Or has your species' emotional volatility infected her judgment? She was already unstable. Her coloration proves genetic deviation. Now she bonds with an alien who was sent to murder her. This is madness. This is love, Seraphine said, rising to her feet. Her patterns blazed defiant gold, something you've forgotten in all your precious restraint. Love is a human weakness. We evolved past such inefficiency. No, Seraphine said. You evolved past feeling. There's a difference. Kelthos's patterns flickered, the first crack in his control. If you leave with him, you are Cathara. Dead to us, is he worth that? Seraphine looked at Jacob, and her patterns softened to warm amber. Yes! An alarm shrieked through the ship. Red emergency lighting flooded the chamber. Kelthos's expression shifted to shock as his terminal flashed urgent warnings. Hull breach, someone is... The bulkhead exploded. Wraith moved through the smoke like liquid shadow, adaptive camouflage rippling across their form. A plasma blade ignited in one hand, cutting through bioluminescent panels. 2 Athari guards dropped before Jacob could process the threat. Targets acquired, Wraith said, voice distorted by modulation. Contracts honored. Jacob shoved Seraphine behind him, muscle memory overriding thought. Wraith was augmented, faster, stronger, enhanced reflexes making them nearly impossible to predict. Jacob had seconds, maybe less. Seraphine didn't wait to be protected. She lunged sideways, grabbing a fallen guard's pulse weapon and firing in one fluid motion. The shot went wide, but it bought Jacob time to close distance. He dove low, sweeping Wraith's legs while Seraphine fired again. This shot connected, scorching Wraith's shoulder. Run, Jacob shouted. They ran. The corridor became chaos. Emergency bulkheads slamming down, crew members scrambling for safety, Wraith's pursuit relentless despite the injury. Seraphine's knowledge of the ship saved them. She pulled Jacob through maintenance passages, medical bays, past cargo holds until they reached the escape pods. Here, she gasped, punching in access codes, the pod door eye-rised open. Get in! Jacob dragged her inside. The pod was designed for 2, cramped and claustrophobic. Seraphine initiated launch protocols while Jacob sealed the hatch. Through the viewport, he saw Wraith round the corner, weapon raised. Now, Jacob yelled. The pod ejected with violent force, throwing them against the restraints. Through the port, the Athari ship shrank rapidly, then the horizon's edge beyond it. They were alone in vacuum, tumbling through contested space with no destination and both their governments hunting them. Seraphine's breathing was ragged, patterns flickering erratically, shock and adrenaline and terror bleeding together. Jacob reached for her, and she collapsed against him, her forehead pressing against his in the Athari gesture of profound trust. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry I brought this on you. Don't. Her voice was fierce despite the trembling. Don't apologize for the only honest thing anyone's ever given me. Jacob wrapped his arms around her, feeling her heart pound against his chest. Her skin was hot, patterns blazing even in distress. They'd crossed every line: duty, species, loyalty. They were fugitives now, outcasts from their own people, hunted by forces that wanted them dead. But when Seraphine tilted her face up and kissed him, fierce and desperate and achingly real, Jacob understood that some choices were worth any cost. Outside, the stars wheeled past in endless silence, and somewhere in the dark, their future waited to be written. The trading station Meridian Outpost existed in the gray spaces between territories, neutral ground where questions weren't asked, and survival was currency. The station master, a grizzled woman named Torres, took one look at their bloodied clothes and damaged pod and quoted them an extortionate docking fee. Jacob paid without argument. Their quarters were a converted storage unit, 10 meters square with a bunk, a terminal, and a recycler unit that smelled faintly of coolant. Seraphine sat on the edge of the bunk, patterns dim with exhaustion, while Jacob secured the door and activated every security protocol he knew. We have maybe 6 hours before someone traces us here, he said. Then we work fast. Seraphine pulled up the data they downloaded from the horizon's edge, access logs, chemical analyses, communications intercepts. We need to decrypt this and transmit it before Wraith finds us again. They worked in silence, shoulders pressed together in the cramped space. Jacob's training and Seraphine's xenobiological expertise created a synergy he'd never experienced. She'd spot a pattern in the data, he'd cross-reference it with tactical intelligence, and together they built a picture of the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed them both. Helix Dynamics, a defense contractor with embedded operatives in both Earth's military and Athari diplomatic circles. Profits derived from interstellar conflicts and weapons development. The sabotage, the murder, even Wraith's contract. all orchestrated to ignite war between species. Here, Seraphine said, highlighting a financial transaction, payment to a territorial defense officer for strategic consultation. The account signature matches. Commander Vance. Jacob's stomach turned. His commanding officer. The man who'd sent him to kill Seraphine hadn't been following Earth's interests. He'd been following a paycheck. Seraphine's hand found his, squeezing tight. We can prove it, all of it. They encrypted the evidence package and transmitted it simultaneously to Captain Hale and the Athari Collective's Security Council. Then they waited, knowing that verification would take hours they might not have. Jacob downloaded what weapons he could from the station's gray market. Seraphine requisitioned medical supplies and Athari biodeterrents. They ate ration bars that tasted like recycled cardboard and tried not to think about the teams hunting them. What happens if they don't believe the evidence? Seraphine asked quietly. Then we keep running. For how long? As long as it takes. Jacob turned to face her, cupping her jaw with one hand. Her skin was warm beneath his palm, patterns flickering uncertain gold. I meant what I said. You're worth it. Her eyes searched his face, and he saw the war there, hope battling against every lesson her culture had taught her about emotional restraint and collective duty. Then she leaned in and kissed him. Slower this time, less desperate, but no less intense. Jacob felt her hand slide into his hair, felt the heat of her body as she pulled him closer, and for a moment the universe narrowed to just this, her mouth on his, her patterns blazing amber gold against his closed eyelids, the taste of her breath. When they broke apart, her voice was rough. If we survive this, if we somehow make it out alive, what then? I don't know, Jacob admitted, but I want to find out. The station's proximity alarm shrieked. Jacob checked the sensors and cursed. Unmarked ship, military-grade stealth configuration. It's Wraith. They moved. Jacob grabbed weapons while Seraphine activated the station's emergency protocols. Bulkheads sealing, security drones deploying. The station's cargo bays were a labyrinth of containers and loading equipment, and Jacob led them deep into the maze, using every trick his training had burned into muscle memory. Wraith found them anyway. The assassin dropped from overhead conduits, plasma blade igniting with a hiss that promised death. Jacob fired 3 times. Wraith dodged with augmented reflexes, closing distance impossibly fast. Seraphine threw herself sideways, activating an Athari bioweapon, a spore grenade that erupted in bioluminescent gas. Wraith's camouflage flickered, disrupted by the spores. Jacob pressed the advantage, closing to melee range where Wraith's enhancements mattered less. They traded blows, brutal and efficient, and Jacob felt ribs crack under Wraith's augmented strength. But Seraphine was there, fighting with the warrior training beneath her diplomatic veneer, her movements lethal grace. They forced Wraith back, step by step, toward the cargo airlock. Jacob's tactical mind saw the opening, and Seraphine followed his lead without words. Perfect synchronization, born from trust. Jacob feinted left while Seraphine swept Wraith's legs. The assassins stumbled, and Jacob slammed his full weight into them, driving Wraith through the airlock threshold. Seraphine hit the emergency release. The airlock cycled. Wraith's enhanced reflexes weren't fast enough. Vacuum claimed the assassin in seconds, the body tumbling into endless dark. Jacob and Seraphine collapsed against each other, breathing hard, adrenaline making them shake. Station security arrived moments later, weapons drawn, and Jacob raised his hands slowly. "We need to speak to your commander," he said. "Now." Captain Hale's message arrived 6 hours later. Evidence authenticated. Warrants issued for Helix Dynamics executives and complicit officers, including Commander Vance. Both Earth and the Athari Collective acknowledge your innocence. However, political pressure remains. Hardliners on both sides want examples made. The follow-up message from Vance himself was colder. Rayner, reinstatement available if you return immediately and sever contact with the Athari liaison. Your choice, career or alien. Seraphine received her own message from Kelthos. Jacob watched her patterns dim as she read it. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. The collective rules that my bond with you constitutes cultural transgression. I can return if I sever all contact with you. Otherwise, I'm exiled permanently. Her voice broke. They're giving me what I feared most, the choice to be normal or be myself. Jacob took her hands, waiting until she met his eyes. What do you want? I want, she began, then stopped. Her patterns flickered through a dozen colors before settling into steady, warm amber. I want to stop pretending. I want to stop being ashamed of who I am. I want to choose passion over safety, truth over acceptance. She squeezed his hands. I want you. Then that's what you'll have. They stood together on the station's observation deck, stars stretching forever beyond the viewport. Jakob had already transmitted his response to Vance. 2 words that ended his career but freed his conscience. I resign. What will we do? Seraphine asked. We know both species better than most. We've seen how easily they can be manipulated into conflict. Jakob pulled her closer, feeling her warmth seep into him. We become mediators, independent. We work in the border zones, facilitate communication, prevent wars before they start. Living between worlds, never quite belonging to either. With you I belong everywhere. Jacob tilted her face up, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Or nowhere, I don't care which. She kissed him then, and it was different from before. Not desperate or afraid, but certain. A promise rather than a plea. Her patterns blazed gold so bright they cast shadows on the viewport, and Jacob understood that this was what Athari bonding looked like. Light made visible, emotion too powerful to contain. When they broke apart, Seraphine rested her forehead against his, breathing him in. They'll never fully forgive us, either side. We'll be outsiders forever. I know. Good, she smiled fierce and free. I'm tired of fitting in. 6 months later, they operated from a frontier station in the Kepler Belt, handling disputes between human miners and Athari survey teams. Their success rate spoke for itself. No conflicts escalated, no shots fired, communication channels established where none existed before. Earth's Territorial Defense Command pretended not to notice. The Athari Collective maintained official silence. But in quiet moments, off the record, both governments began routing delicate negotiations through the independent mediators who understood both species too well to let pride or fear destroy tentative peace. In their shared quarters, Seraphine traced the bioluminescent patterns on her forearms, now glowing with steady amber warmth that her people associated with bonded love. Jacob held her close, his hand over her heart, feeling the rhythm that matched his own. They'd lost everything their old lives had promised: rank, status, belonging, the approval of their respective peoples. But they'd gained something neither had known they needed: the freedom to be exactly who they were, the courage to choose love over duty, and the understanding that home wasn't a place or a people. Home was this, each other, the work they built together, the life they carved from the spaces between worlds. Outside, the stars turned slowly, indifferent and eternal. And inside, 2 souls who'd crossed every boundary to find each other finally rested, transformed by the journey from enemies to partners to something deeper than either species had words for. Love that transcended biology, politics, and fear. Love that proved courage and vulnerability could reshape the universe one honest choice at a time.